So the Black Ops Cold War Alpha took place over the weekend on PS4, and I managed to get quite a few hours in playing the different modes and maps that were on offer to get a general gist on how the game plays. But the big question is, was it any good? And how does it stack up against Modern Warfare and other COD games in the past? Well, that's what we're going to be going over today, because I'm going to be sharing all of my opinions, giving my general impressions, and running over the good stuff and the bad stuff in this video. Think of it as a bit of a mini review. You do have to remember that it was only an alpha at the end of the day, so obviously the end product isn't going to be exactly the same, but we can kind of get a good idea of what that end product's going to be like, because the game's going to be out in just over a month, so Treyarch aren't exactly in a position to completely overhaul everything and change very much. The core foundations of the game are pretty much set in stone, so we should probably expect Black Ops Cold War to play out in a pretty similar way to the alpha. Anyway, getting down to it, I'm going to be splitting this video into two sections, going through all of the things I actually liked about the Cold War alpha first, followed by all of the stuff that I didn't like about it in just a bit, and then sort of summarising it quickly at the end. To start us off, probably one of the best things I found about the alpha, which actually took me by surprise a bit, was the overall time to kill, which I actually thought was quite nicely balanced. You're not getting slapped every couple of seconds like you do in Modern Warfare, with everything seeming to be a lot more punishing in that game, but at the same time you can still drop other players reasonably quickly, providing you can stay on target, making it feel slightly more skill based, as opposed to it all being down to who's drank the most coffee. A slightly slower time to kill gives you a better chance to react to enemies on screen and take them on in a gunfight. You can usually get to cover slightly easier without instantly getting shredded every time you run out into the open, so although a lot of people might like the rapid kill times from Modern Warfare, I thought this made Cold War a little bit less frustrating at times. Not all the time, but it definitely made getting around the maps less of a struggle overall. Speaking of the maps, you'll probably be glad to know that they're not as campy as they are in Modern Warfare. There's generally a lot less windowsill humping and head glitching, and you're no longer going to keep getting taken down from loads of different unexpected angles, with the maps being more linear in design and having less random areas that you can climb up to. Oh yeah, and no more of those awkward bloody doors either. Most of the maps in the alpha seem to flow quite well, apart from maybe the map Miami, which I thought could have had a bit more cover in the middle area and perhaps slightly better player visibility. But generally speaking, I found them to be a bit more fun to play on than in Modern Warfare, which is quite notorious for having a few maps that are a bit shite. I will say that this game feels a lot more arcadey than Modern Warfare, which I guess could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you like, though because of this it does tie into the traditional COD formula a bit better, making it more reminiscent of one of those old school titles, rather than something that tries to take itself too seriously, which made Cold War feel a bit more familiar in the way it plays. The health bar thingy that pops up above enemies' heads can be a bit off-putting at times. It didn't bother me a hell of a lot, though I know it is going to annoy some people, but thankfully you should be able to switch it off in the final build, which I can see quite a lot of people doing. You'll be pleased to know that not only does the traditional minimap return in the way we know it well, but so does good footsteps audio too, along with the dead silence perk. So you've now generally got more tactical knowledge and better spatial awareness, being able to see where enemies are firing from, with them popping up as little red blips in the corner of the screen, but also being able to hear them running around nearby, giving you a heads up on their position. Gunsmith is back, but it's a bit more simplistic and easier to understand this time around, with there being more information available on how those attachments are going to affect your guns, which makes life a little bit easier for when you're putting together your loadouts. So that's generally the main good points out of the way without going into too much detail, but it's time to move over to the not so good points. Straight off the bat, Black Ops Cold War's graphics and animations just seem a bit rubbish. A pretty big step backwards from Modern Warfare anyway, which kinda set a new benchmark for the series. Everything just feels a bit flat and uninspiring to look at. Not a completely ugly game, but nowhere near the level that a lot of people were probably expecting. It's bound to look a bit better on the next gen consoles and on PC, but on PS4 the visuals weren't exactly very impressive at all, and the animations seemed a bit clunky and robotic, generally lacking some overall polish. Visuals weren't the only thing to take a hit in comparison to Modern Warfare, because apart from the footsteps, the sound design wasn't exactly the best either, especially the gun noises, which I'm going to be honest and say were a bit naff. This kinda made the weapons feel a bit more like plastic toys rather than powerful tools of war. Sounds were pretty clear, but not exactly very natural or atmospheric, which made the game feel even more arcadey. Grenades seemed to take bloody ages to throw, which was a bit of a nuisance in some scenarios where you just needed to react to something fast, though I suppose after a while this became a bit more bearable, as you just had to try and remember to take that extra time into account. Probably one of the big things you'll hear a lot of people talking about is skill-based matchmaking, which unfortunately might be back. It didn't feel quite as strong as it did in Modern Warfare, though I did notice that some matches seem to be a bit sweatier than others after doing well in the previous round. Could be a complete coincidence, but knowing Activision, I wouldn't be surprised if skill-based matchmaking was around during the alpha. I'll probably talk more about that topic in another video soon though, but it is something that really needs to be in its own ranked server if it's going to be around. Otherwise, just get rid of it. One thing in particular that kinda pissed me off a bit was the fact that there weren't any field of view or response curve settings, and joystick dead zone could only be lowered to about 10% in the advanced settings, which, for a lot of players like myself, just isn't low enough. These lack of options made the controls feel a lot stickier and less responsive overall, kinda meaning that to be accurate in a lot of gunfights, you'd need to aim at your target by strafing around, rather than actually aiming with the joystick. I know for a fact that a lot of people who play Modern Warfare have now gotten used to the new response curve settings, which makes Cold War feel a bit awkward to play in comparison. Proper dead zone settings are also a must in FPS games these days, as nearly every modern shooter has them, because lower dead zones make aiming feel a lot more fluid and responsive, so we really should be able to adjust them more. With all that said though, dead zone settings never actually made their way into Modern Warfare's alpha or beta, but they did come along eventually in the final game, so I guess this could be the case here too. Hopefully so. But anyway, the bottom line, I generally thought that the Cold War alpha was okay, but that's pretty much it. It didn't feel particularly special or fresh, but I still had a bit of fun with it nevertheless. Modern Warfare had a hell of a lot more buzz going around it, despite that game having a lot of issues with camping and heavy skill-based matchmaking, but overall I think it had a much bigger impact than Cold War, which doesn't really give me any real reason to get very excited. It does feel more in line with the past games, having a more arcadey style that doesn't take itself too seriously, though going off the general vibe of the game, I reckon that Cold War is going to be one of those typical old-fashioned COD games that's going to be absolutely plastered with daft cosmetics, zany camos and outlandish outfits, to cater to all the kids. It feels like it's primed to go in that direction already with its presentation style, so if you're expecting a gritty game based around the Cold War, I think you're probably going to be disappointed. It's only a matter of time before those weed symbols start popping up all over the place. I reckon Black Ops Cold War could very well be the Battlefield hardline of the Call of Duty franchise, not only because it's got those similar kind of quirky vibes, but because it could also have a bit of a split fanbase too, with quite a lot of people actually preferring the game's return to more familiar territory, but many others are probably going to see it as a step backwards, being put off by the visuals and overall design, whilst generally favouring Modern Warfare's punchier, grittier style more so too. There's going to be a lot more content coming to Black Ops Cold War, as the alpha only gave us a bit of a taste, but we can assume that the final product's going to play out in a very similar sort of way, only with more stuff to mess around with more maps, guns and modes, and everything else you can typically expect from a COD game. So did you get a chance to play the alpha? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was lackluster? Let me know all of your opinions down below in the comments. But that's pretty much it for this one. I could blabber on all day about the ins and outs of the alpha, but those are generally the main key points I want to talk about at the moment. Thanks for watching folks, subscribe for more content, and I'll be seeing you in that next episode.